Hey, this is Ken Casey from the Dropkick Murphys, and I'm hanging out with Rob on Front Row Live.
Let's talk about how awesome this panel, this summit that Billboard is doing. Like, what is that like when you get to actually go back in time and talk to an audience about like the creative process of your band?
Yeah, it's cool. This is not something I'm typically doing or invited to a part of, but you hit the nail on the head. You don't often also stop to reflect often. So to talk about that stuff and kind of think about how unique our path was to a degree in the music industry is pretty it's cool. Right. Definitely.
Now, as you kind of like reflect on that, like, are there ever any like moments that you kind of think about that, like, at the time you didn't think like were possible, or at the time you didn't think you'd be able to get out of that situation to become the band that you are today? Did that kind of happen to you?
I'd say in the early days it was more like just like opening for other, like we had no goals really, because what I talked about earlier being just it was the nature of the band was like a bet, and then it was like, oh, we played in front of people who didn't actually know us and they didn't throw things at us. Okay, well now we're gonna open for, we would get to open for like at the Rat, which is an old club in Boston. We get to open for like, current bands we liked like at the time, like the Swingin' Utters from San Francisco, and then a lot of like the old British punk bands when they were coming through, and they were just the bands that we idolized growing up, and we're like my quote to my wife would always be, I'm going to set myself on fire after we get to open for so-and-so, and then we would, and I go, oh, geez, I guess my next goal is, and so those were like the big time. And then once we really got into it with touring, it was like you never stopped to like go, I can't believe this happened, because you just always go. And not to say you weren't smelling the roses at the time. I mean, we appreciated it, but it just was all kind of part and parcel of what we were doing. And then the next kind of times that it really hit me like that is it's not even music related, it's sports related, when we got to do things like, be on the field when the Red Sox won the first time in 86 years and call my 86-year-old grandfather from the field. And, and even though we weren't playing that night, it was in St. Louis, I knew that it was the band that put me in that position, so to speak, with the things that the band had done with the team and all that. So a lot of time, being on the someone says, "Well, top 5 moments with the band." I go, well, 4 of the 5 are probably not even related to music, So yeah, but like I said, we're appreciative of all of those opportunities, but they've always just kind of been along the way. I was in the Billboard article, in reading it, someone said, they've never taken a year off in 22 years, and we haven't taken any time off, and that's probably why there hasn't been so much time for reflection, So.
Well, speaking of like never taking time off, it's like you're either constantly touring, you're in the studio writing a record, or you're doing so many things outside of music. Like you have the restaurant that you have going on. You also have the boxing that you have going on. So it's like, how do you guys kind of balance something like that when obviously the band itself is just such a big project?
Yeah. Well, the band comes first, obviously, just the scheduling aspect of 7 guys with kids and everything, because it starts to be like that's what management probably needs the biggest pat on the back for is, it's like, oh, I need time off for this birthday, that birthday, this, so it's like I've always just said, like, the band's obviously got to be the number 1 priority, and then you fill in, I'm someone who doesn't like to be, sitting on his hands bored, so in an effort to avoid that, I stay busy, but oftentimes overshoot the mark, and then you're like pulling your hair out going, what am I doing? I need a vacation, but you could have had a vacation, but you decided to do this, and this, So it's just basically, but the great thing is, in a lot of ways, the teams commingled together where like the management, is very aware and involved with what I'm doing with the charity and even the boxing, and the restaurants not so much. Luckily, I have a great partner that I grew up with that we have a great deal where with the restaurants it's like I love the design process and the kind of concept process, so I'll like get the liquor license and the deal and and
behind the scenes.
be involved in the opening process. So he says it's a great deal. You work hard for 6 months, and then I work hard for the next 20 years, you know. And so I'm lucky that with the restaurants, once they're open, pretty much just show up and shake hands, and that's it.
Talk to me more about Murphy's boxing. Like, where did that kind of come from? Like, why did you guys choose to do? I feel like boxing or like wrestling in general is just something like so left field when it comes to artists.
Well, ironically, kind of has absolutely nothing to do with why I got involved with it. However, the nature of the band's name, Dropkick Murphys, came from, there was this old timer named John Dropkick Murphy who was a wrestler, and he used to train fighters after he kind of retired, and he would train wrestlers in boxing. Keep in mind, back then in like the 40s and 50s, wrestling was like, I guess it was still fake, but it was like, you know, that was like a sport. You know, I mean, it's still huge, but at the time, I think it was like, it was a lot more, you know, it was a lot more akin to boxing, whereas they're not anymore. But anyway, so he would train fighters, and he ended up becoming more popular, more well known for his work with detoxifying people before there were detoxes, because he would work with all these fighters, and then they'd end up like going MIA or being drunk, and he started to experiment with giving them like horse tranquilizers and formaldehyde and helping them like taper down. So then people who weren't necessarily training for fights would go to the same place. So it became this like training camp / detox at the same time. And there's all these great old photos of Dropkick on a bike with the towel around his neck like a coach, and the scally cap and a whistle in his mouth, and he's got all these guys out jogging, and there's no explanation on the picture, but I often think, like, was that fighters, or was that, you know, drunks that he was saying, everybody out of bed, we're going for a run? And so there's a lot of history to that, and and there was a lot of boxing to do with that, but I my connection to boxing was just always as a huge boxing fan, and then to help a friend out that was a boxer, and I said, I can help you. I consider myself like a promoter at heart. Like, I really enjoyed the early days of the band, pushing that rock up the hill, like trying to get the word out and making flyers and, you know, all that side of it. And so boxing brought me back to those days, you know what I mean? And because it's not the easiest sell, like punk rock wasn't, and boxing isn't either nowadays. So I just enjoy the challenge, and I was trying to help out a friend, and then next thing you know, I said, well, if you're going to do it for one guy, you might as well do it for this guy and this guy. And now I have, 15 or 20 boxes, and we're doing 6, 8, 10 shows a year, and we combine it sometimes with the band, but not always, and but the Dropkick fans have really taken to it as a way to kind of, they like to support what we're into, whether it's the charity stuff or the restaurants or the boxing, but I think they come to support it, and I also think it's a way for them to kind of be around and see the band, and just because it's not like I'm not talking to all the fans, they're seeing me and we're interacting, and it's a way that they can come and just be part of it. You know.
Let's jump into the music and talk a little bit about the latest album, 11 Short Stories. With this record, actually before this record, you kind of started out with having Lars produce a few records. Then you started producing a couple records. And then the last, 2, 3 records have been with Ted Hutt. How similar or how different are these two producers when you guys go into the studio to collaborate?
Oh, man. Lars and Ted Hutt could not be more different. You know what I mean? Lars is a lot more like me. Yeah. Impulsive, wants what he wants. And I say that with the utmost respect because, like I said, I find us to be similar. And so Lars and I would butt heads like you wouldn't believe. I was also a lot younger and, newer to music or whatever. And, we had a lot of laughs of the things that would come out of our arguments. But that's what producers are there for, because usually no matter how much I butted heads with Lars, at the end we would always go, "You were right, I was." However it ended up on the record, the guy who caved said, "Okay, you were right." Ted could not be more of, like I said, Ted, you should have an honorary degree in psychology. The way he gently handles all the egos, and when I say ego, I don't mean like my bandmates have big egos or that I do, but when someone writes a song, they're passionate about it, and you have to say, hey, should we change this or whatever? It just doesn't always go so well. It's hard to say it in a diplomatic way, and I certainly don't want to say that stuff. And just I say now I would never make another record without. I don't want to make another record without Ted Hutt, because not only does he see it, the way Ted and I view music and how it's made, and he's like my musical soulmate. We think the same way when it comes to music, and to have, and I never thought there'd be a guy that would put as much effort and also like precision into a band that he wasn't in. Because you technically, if you're a producer, you're a hired gun for that. You're going to leave, and anyone we've ever worked with, whether it's been an engineer or even you could talk about an employee or whatever, they're never going to put the attention to detail into it that the band would be, or the owner or whatever it be. But he does, and I find that amazing, and love you, Ted.
Now with this record, like, you guys did a lot of things that were kind of different. First of all, it's the most personal record. Second of all, you guys left Boston to create this record. Do you feel like leaving Boston was what kind of helped create this, or did leaving Boston help make this record the most personal record?
Well, I think because you're away at a studio and only with a guy like Ted, where someone could say, I just had an idea at 1 a.m. Well, no, we probably worked like, 10 a.m. to 1 anyway, but someone could get up at 7 or at 3, go, I have an idea. And like Ted would get up and go in there to do it. That's just how he is. So, I mean, I think like anything in the world, it's like, I suppose it's like why people go to the library when they study. If you remove the outside world as much as possible, you're going to focus more and you're going to do a better job. And for us, when we were in Boston, as much as like Q Division and Somerville, where we've done a bunch of records, the Outpost and Stoughton, that's no longer there, done a bunch of records and loved all those places. But got to the point where guys would be like, you'd say like, where'd so-and-so go? He needs to do his pot. And, oh, he went home to let the dog out. Or his kid had a game. What? I didn't even know he left, And, with traffic, and the next thing they're gone for 4 hours. It's just we were all getting pulled in our normal lives, trying to do our normal lives and record, and you really can't do that. You know what I mean? Or you shouldn't do that anyway. So I don't know if I'd ever see us doing a record in Boston again. I mean, El Paso was a little far. Yeah. And the studio was great, but not to mention was it only far. But then like we were out of town, way out of town. So the big excursion was to go to the one store, which was one of those dollar stores, and like, oh, can we go to the dollar store tonight? So maybe, I know there's some great places in like upstate New York where, you'd be out of it, but like if you ever had to go home for a night or whatever, you could probably still do it, So
the one thing I've admired of the band is that, over the years, you guys have tried new things. You guys have changed your sound a little bit, but you've never, you still stay true to the band. I feel like that's something that, artists today, when they try to do something different, they kind of change the truthfulness of the band itself. Like, how have you guys been able to stay true to yourselves over the years while you guys are still experimenting?
There'd probably be an element of the fan base that would say that's not true, that we've changed too much and we're not this and not that. But there's a dichotomy there of, one, we started out with a lot of influences. Like our very first album had full-on ballad. We had full-on hardcore songs. We had full-on, kind of 77 Brit punk influenced punk songs. It's like when you start out all over the map like that, it gives you a lot more leeway to continue to try that. So when people say you changed, I go, well, did we? I mean, listen to how much we did different stuff before. But I think that really, to me, from my mind, which is the only one that it really matters to, because I can't control what everyone else thinks, is that we believe in it. We put our heart and soul into it. It's coming from a real place, as opposed to just like, oh, we want to try this direction because it's popular on the radio now or something. I remember we always used to have like records would come out on a radio station and Boston would play it, and maybe another city was thinking about picking it up, and they said, can we get an alternate mix with like the bagpipes down? And we're like, no, you can't, but we don't play bagpipes on the radio. Oh, we don't play banjo on the radio. You know, and then, you know what I mean. Then, you know, so it's just you can't keep everyone happy, and if you're doing what you do from, you know, from here, then I think the real fans will get that. You know,
Right.
so. But you also have a lot of different styles where, like, what one person misses and going, I love them because I love their fastest, heaviest songs. Okay, well, we do less of that now. You know what I mean? Just because part of it is just aging, man. You know, sometimes you just feel like a moron up there playing. You know,
It's hard to do those same songs on stage now.
Well, I mean, I watch all hardcore doesn't age as well. You know what I mean? Like a lot of my favorite old bands still do reunions, and I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't see that. You know what I mean? The music's still great, but you know, so, but there's definitely one side that likes one style, one side, and then there's a lot that like it all. You know, but there's definitely elements that have their preferences of what we've always done. You know,
Right. Now, one last thing is you guys are kicking off 2019 with the St. Patrick's Day headline tour. Can we talk a little bit about this tour and, you know, what is expected on this tour? You have a lot of new artists as well on this tour. For one of the shows, you have the Interrupters, who's been getting a lot of attention this year.
Yeah, we've had the Interrupters on tour with us before, and great kids, great people. Just, you know, there's just that element of the circle, whether it's, you know, going back to the Hellcat Rancid days and the Hellcat, and you know, and just knowing them, you know, from before, knowing some of the kids in the band from before, and just you hit it off. Like, this is like family, you know. It's not. And then it's also always, you know, Booze of Glory, who's on some of the shows. They tour internationally like crazy. We have a lot of respect for them, and to finally have them kind of over in Europe. Lenny Lashley, Gang of One, who's, you know, dear old friend and love his band, and then, you know, Amigo the Devil, which I'm really into, you know, touring solo, but I never met him. So you get a little, like, you get that comfortable old kind of like, whoa, we love these bands, we're excited to be on the road with them, and then you get someone that you're looking forward to meeting and looking forward to seeing them every night. So that's a huge part of it for us. Who are we traveling with in the package? Because it keeps it fresh for us too, you know. So.
Awesome. I definitely look forward to that tour. That kicks off, is it March that it kicks off, or February?
Mid-February, yes. I think like the 16th or 17th, and see you out there.